Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Randana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Randana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Mishnapad Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad's Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad-gītā Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. All right. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 25th day of February 2025 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in the introduction, page 23, second paragraph. Okay. Page 23, second paragraph. Just follow along. The Bhagavad Gita 8.6 also explains the general principle that makes it possible to enter the spiritual kingdom simply by thinking of the Supreme at the time of death. I'll say, you say. Yang vapi smaran bhavam jajatyante kalevaram tang tame vaiti konteya Sadatad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his present body, in his next life he will attain to that state without fail. Close quote. Now, first we must understand that material nature is a display of one of the energies of the Supreme Lord. In the Vishnu Purana 6.761, the total energies of the Supreme Lord are delineated. I'll say, you say. Vishnu Shakti Paraprokta Kshetra Gyakya Tata Para Avidya Karma Sangyanya Tritiya Shaktirishyate. The Supreme Lord has diverse and innumerable energies which are beyond our conception. However, great learned sages or liberated souls have studied these energies and have analyzed them into three parts. All of the energies are of Vishnu Shakti. That is to say, they are different potencies of Lord Vishnu. The first energy is Para, transcendental. Living entities also belong to the superior energy, as has already been explained. The other energies, or material energies, are in the mode of ignorance. At the time of death, either we can remain in the inferior energy of this material world, or we can transfer to the energy of the spiritual world. So the Bhagavad Gita 8.6 says, again, Yang yang bhapi smarang bhavam Chajatyante kalevadam Tangtame vaiti konteya Sadatad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his present body, in his next life he will attain to that state without fail. In life, we are accustomed to thinking either of the material or of the spiritual energy. Now, how can we transfer our thoughts from the material energy to the spiritual energy? There are so many literatures which fill our thoughts with the material energy. Newspapers, magazines, novels, etc. Our thinking, which is now absorbed in these literatures, must be transferred to the Vedic literatures. The great sages, therefore, have written so many Vedic literatures, such as the Puranas. The Puranas are not imaginative, they are historical records. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya 21-22, there is the following verse. Maya mugda jiver nahi svata Krishna gyan. Jivere kripaya koila Krishna Veda Puran. The forgetful living entities or conditioned souls have forgotten their relationship with the Supreme Lord, and they are engrossed in thinking of material activities. Just to transfer their thinking power to the spiritual sky, Krishna Dvaipayana Vyas has given a great number of Vedic literatures. First he divided the Vedas into 4, then he explained them in the Puranas, and for less capable people, he wrote the Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, there is given the Bhagavad Gita. Then all Vedic literature is summarized in the Vedanta Sutra, and for future guidance, he gave a natural commentation on the Vedanta Sutra called Srimad Bhagavatam. We must always engage our minds in reading these Vedic literatures, just as materialists engage their minds in reading newspapers, magazines, and so many materialistic literatures. We must transfer our reading to these literatures which are given to us by Vyasadeva. In that way, it will be possible for us to remember the Supreme Lord at the time of death. That is the only way suggested by the Lord, and he guarantees the result. Therefore, there is no doubt. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mama nusmara yudhyacha mayarpata mano buddhir mame vaishyasya sangsheha. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time continue your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me, and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. He does not advise Arjuna simply to remember him and give up his occupation. No, the Lord never suggests anything impractical. In this material world, in order to maintain the body, one has to work. Human society is divided according to work into 4 divisions of social order: Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. The Brahmin class, or intelligent class, is working in one way, the Kshatriya, or administrative class, is working in another way, and the mercantile class and the laborers are all tending to their specific duties.
In the human society, whether one is a laborer, merchant, administrator, or farmer, or even if one belongs to the highest class and is a literary man, a scientist, or a theologian, he has to work in order to maintain his existence. The Lord therefore tells Arjuna that he need not give up his occupation, but while he is engaged in his occupation, he should remember Krishna, Mam Anusmara. If Arjuna doesn't practice remembering Krishna while he is struggling for existence, then it will not be possible for him to remember Krishna at the time of death. Lord Chaitanya also advises this. He says, Kirtaniya sadaharihi. One should practice chanting the names of the Lord always. The names of the Lord and the Lord are non-different. So Lord Krishna's instruction to Arjuna to remember me and Lord Chaitanya's injunction to always chant the names of Lord Krishna are the same instruction. There is no difference. Because Krishna and Krishna's name are non-different. There is no difference because Krishna and Krishna's name are non-different. In the absolute status, there is no difference between reference and referent. Therefore, we have to practice remembering the Lord always, 24 hours a day, by chanting His names and molding our life's activities in such a way that we can remember Him always. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, in these few pages, Srila Prabhupada has condensed the essence of Krishna consciousness. He began by explaining in page 23, the Bhagavad-gītā 8.6, this very important verse. Whatever we think about, whatever is the dominant thought in our minds, when the body finally breaks down and we leave the body dying, that thought, that prominent thought is the template, if you will, upon which the next body is built. So then the question arises, assuming that that's true, how can we train our minds so that at that critical moment, even if it comes unexpectedly, which it very well may, we'll be thinking of Krishna. The dominant thought will be Krishna. Not easy, because unless you're trained from birth in thinking of Krishna, fortunate souls like Srila Prabhupada and others, great devotees, born into devotee families, from very childhood, they're thinking of, they like Prabhupada would recount how his father gave him little deities to play with. And when he wanted to do his own Ratha Yatra, and Prabhupada was he was as willful then as he was, so his father was very amenable. And actually he was looking for one to buy, but then one lady saw that he wanted to do it, and so she gave him she had a cart suitable, and he arranged for his playmates to do Ratha Yatra. So that's the most fortunate situation. But here in the West, it's very rare to have that, So still, but understanding the importance of it, we can take up the practice of Krishna consciousness seriously. And now we can turn up the heat. I'm hot. So, the previous verse in the 8th chapter, I think, is Antakale chamame vasmadan mukta kalevadam yakpriyati samadbhavam yastinachata sanksya, where he's saying Antakale, that means end time. In other words, the time of death. Antakale chamame vasmadan, those who remember me, smaran means to remember. Yakpriyati samadbhavam, they attain to my nature, they attain to the spiritual world. There's no doubt about it, he says there. So, if one believes that, and he really wants to try to engage in that, then you can enter into the process of devotional service. And that, the science of how to do that is explained in detail by Rupa Goswami in his book, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which Srila Prabhupada mercifully translated as the Nectar of Devotion, one of our main books. You have the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and the Nectar of Devotion. And Nectar of Instruction is also very important too. It's just 11 verses of practical instruction by that same Rupa Goswami in Bhakti. So when you think about it, what's the lifestyle of a devotee? So I've been doing it for years. Chad is serious, and so someone who lives in the ashram. Now that's a big thing, to try to association is so important. I mean, that's not a mystery. Any parent wants to know who his 10-year-old kid is hanging out with, right? You know, where did you get that haircut? You know, I guess because your association forms your consciousness. There's a famous phrase, you know, part of a verse: "Sangat sanjayate kama." Sangat means association. The famous sadhu sangha, which is probably in the English dictionary by now, or maybe at least satsang, which is the same thing. So every parent knows, and it's not a mystery, that the people you hang out with, the books you read, the things you see, what you hear, and that's going to form your consciousness, right? That's why we have an educational system, so that you don't just raise a bunch of aborigines, you know, running around with no education, can't read. There's enough of those people around anyway. But there's always an educational system, and every society wants to bring, you know, train up a population that'll have morals, that'll be, you know, good at working, you know, enthusiastic, civilized people. So that's, you know, but that without any religion, without any understanding of God, it's all Maya. It may seem like we got it together, you know, but ultimately, what the measure of success is how spiritually realized people are getting, so that they can actually achieve the goal of human life. That there is a goal of human life, not just how many pleasures can you accumulate and how this and that. You know, that's actually hellish life, because that will be the thought at the time of death. Can you imagine? You know, some video game going around in your brain or whatever. You know, where's that going to take you? Not back to Godhead. But so Prabhupada here in I think page 24, yeah, he's going through the different Vedic literatures. This is why, you know, the process of writing, you know, and leaving these thoughts for others, very nicely composed, you know, so that the literature is attractive in and of itself, like the Sanskrit poetry. You know, even if you don't even know what it means, like, you know, if you hear the sound, you know, that in itself is attractive. What to speak if you know what I mean? Which is, I'll just tell you, this is a verse Rupa Goswami wrote for his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, describing these chapters in different rasas, and what is it? The Vatsalya ras. Vatsalya ras is parental, you know, love of God, baby Krishna, very delightful. So here's the verse describing, you know, and it's there, you know. Bhanu Swami, he translated the actual Sanskrit, and we can buy that now, you know. Although he didn't put any word-by-word meanings in there, so that's kind of frustrating. But this verse I'll explain to you. It's very easy. Kvanita kanaka kinkani kalapam. Now, we all know what alliteration is. Did you learn in 5th grade? Alliteration, where each word begins with the same, you know, sound. So Sanskrit, that's part of anupras, it's called. So you can just, you know, even without knowing the meaning, kvanita kanaka kinkani kalapam. All those Ks, right? So what does it mean? Kvanita means sounding very sweetly. Kanaka means gold. Kinkani means the bells that he's wearing around his waist. Kalapam simply means a series of bells. So Krishna's crawling. He's a little baby. He's got the bells around his waist, and he's got, in the next line we'll learn, he has a little beautiful pearl affixed to his nose. That's all he's wearing. So and he has a little butterball in his hand, and he's smiling, and he's approaching his mother. Can you imagine? So, Kvanita Kanika Kinkani Kalapam, that describes the sweet tinkling of the bells as he's crawling to his mother. Kinkanika. Smita Mukam, smiling face, you know. Ujjvala, shining. Ujjvala Nasikagra Muktam, to the tip of his nose, Nasikagra is affixed his beautiful Muktam, which is the word for prayer, for pearl, you know, right? So that's the scene. Kvanita Kinkanika, the Smita Mukam Ujjvala, then Kada in his hand. Kada he's holding, Drita. Kada Drita Navanita Pindam. Navanita means fresh butter. And Pindam means ball, fresh butter ball, you know. I guess right out of the fridge, so it's not melting. Contd Karajutanavanitapindam Agre, before his mother, Agre Taniyam, she sees her son. Taniyam Aveksha, she sees. Nananda Nanda Patni. Nanda Patni is a name for Yashoda, means the wife of Nanda. But Nananda means to, I think there's only one word for it, ecstasize. She's becoming ecstacised, blissed out, by seeing this scene of a darling son coming toward her with a fresh butterball, as if to offer it to her. You can imagine. So what a delightful little poem, you know. And if I can show you how to figure out the meter. So you learn it, you memorize it, you can see it. It's going to help you remember Krishna at the time of death. And there's so many verses like that. And the most important one is right up on the front there. The Hare Krishna mantra. That contains everything. But because our minds are always curious, there's all of this, you know, ecstatic poems and verses in the Bhagavatam. Some of them are very bracing. You know, there's also some very serious instruction there. One of my favorites is like this, you know, because Prabhupada said, "Oh, what's going to be your thought at the time of death?" So this one explains what happens if you don't absorb your mind in Krishna Katha, but in Kukata. So it says, Brahma is speaking, and he's describing who gets to go to Goloka Vrindavan, or Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, and who doesn't. So this one describes who doesn't. Yanna vajandhagabado rachananuvara chinbantihe annivishya kukata matigni yastu shuddha hatabagar atasaras tang tang chapanta shadaneshu tamaksuhanta. Serious verse. So what he's saying is, young, they don't get to go. Young na vrajanti. Vrajanti means to go. Here's who doesn't get to go. Young na vrajanti. Agabida. Agabida means he who destroys all sin, or it can mean he who killed the Aghasura demon. Agabida. Rachananuvara. Rachana means to create, or a creation. Anuvara means words, a creation of words, books, or what you hear orally. This is Rachananuvara. So, Shunvanti yen anya vishaya kukata matigni. So instead of listening to stories about he who destroys all sin, who killed the Aghasura, in other words, Krishna Katha, you're hearing all the time Kukata, which is about other subject matter, Anya Katha, which is Kukata instead of Krishna Katha, bad sounds, which is Matigni, which destroys your intelligence. We're surrounded by it. It's coming out of your phone, it's coming out of your earphones, it's everywhere, you know. So you have to be disciplined in turning your attention, you know, chanting yourself and associating with others who can help you. So here's the result of that. Kukata matigni yastu shuddha hatabagaya, all of your good fortune is stolen away by those sounds describing material things saturated with the modes of nature. Hatabagaya nibirata saras, and takes away the essence of your life, which is spiritual advancement. In other words, that is all covered and destroyed. And then here's the scary part, tang, tang, chapanti, those very sounds that you listen to and which are bouncing around your brain, they cast you down, chapant ashadaneshu tamaksuhanta, to a place of darkness, a hellish existence, where there's no shelter. So it's all in the sounds that you hear. Then what you say, what you hear, what you read, and what you write. So therefore, Prabhupada has inundated us with these books, and as I was mentioning in my last class, which I think was this morning, he's also given us, so many recordings. It's cold in here. Why don't you turn the heat on? You never give enough heat. No, I'm just kidding. This is my mind is absorbed in the bodily concept of life. So this is the Bhagavatam is filled with verses like that. How to create live a life, and that's what this movement is all about. That's what how you can live your life simply in the association of other devotees and fill it with Krishna Katha. I remember when I joined, it was, thank God, it was the last year or so where everyone was going out on Harinam every day for a few hours at least, 3 hours. So in the morning, my first engagement was filling these little bottles full of fragrant oils as part of the, the spiritual sky incense business, which Prabhupada authorized. It was okay, centered in LA. Where the temples could to support themselves, the householders can support themselves with that. So I worked on that for a few hours, and then after lunch, off I went. Central Park, Fifth Avenue. I was living in Brooklyn. We went up to Manhattan. I would drive the truck sometimes. I have a picture, not too good clarity, of me jumping up and down in Central Park, chanting. Oh, that was so important. You know, because you could be in all kinds of confusion and Maya and doubts, but then when you went on Harinam, everything cleared away, because the holy name is a great elixir. You know, even for Westerners, I was 25 when I joined. It wasn't like I joined when I was 10 or 15. You know, so it has all these different things. But I had done a bunch of yoga, and I had invented this meditation process. You sit quietly. You can try it. Watch your breath, and on the in-breath, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And on the out-breath, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Very simple. It's actually in the books. There's a place in the books where Prabhupada says, oh, this is an authorized process. I'll try to find it. Anyway, very fortunate he came. And now Prabhupada is giving the science, because our consciousness is developed by everything we do every day. I mean, that's obvious. And here's the basic principle. What you think of at the time of death, that's your destiny. You're making it every minute of every day. What you hear, what you say, what you speak, what you read, what you write, what you see, and who you associate with. So we should make an effort to try to seriously practice the chanting, and give up those sinful activities which are great impediments to our devotional service. Because those, the illicit sex, gambling, intoxication, and meat eating, they are very powerful sensual activities and emotional activities, which can completely absorb your mind and cause a lot of suffering. And yes, there's some pleasure involved, but that pleasure is your worst enemy. And here's one of the verses, those who attend my class, they won't be long before you hear this verse. Yehi sangsparjaja boga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanta konteya meteshu ramate buddha. Intelligent person does not take part in the pleasures that are due to the contact of the senses with the sense objects. O son of Kunti, says Krishna. Such pleasures are the sources of all misery, and they have a beginning and an end. And so the wise do not take part in them. So then the next question one may ask, well, then if I don't, that's the only way I know how to enjoy, so how am I going to enjoy? So that's actually in the previous verse. Bhayasparshesu asaktatmat vindityatma liyat sukham sab brahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam ashnate. Now this is something that you can't find scientifically, but this is what Krishna says. Unattracted to the external contact of the senses, bhayasparsheshu, literally touching the things outside, and with your senses you touch the object. Asaktamman, vindityatmani yasukam, the yogis, they enjoy within the heart. Sab-brahma yoga yuktatma, linking their soul, linking their consciousness to Brahman, and the supreme Brahman is Krishna. So if you can think of Krishna within and without, you can see him. Then you'll gradually you become purified, so that itself is a great pleasure. And we have the great evidence historically. Lord Chaitanya is there. He was the spiritual master of the 6 Goswamis. So how did they live? You had 3 especially who gave up extremely wealthy situations. Rupa and Sanatan were the finance minister and the prime minister of the king, Hussein Shah. So they had all facility. Then they wrote a letter to Lord Chaitanya, and he answered the letter, and he came personally to Ram Keli, I think it was. which is the capital of Bengal at that time. And they immediately surrendered. You know, they could see, they could understand, and then Rupa Goswami, they composed this verse, famous verse, Namo Mahabhadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namani Gaudachijay Namaha. Lord Chaitanya was more or less hiding his identity as Krishna. In fact, if someone called him Krishna, he would place his ears, you know. But he was. He revealed that he was actually Krishna in the mood of Radharani. It's a combination of Radha and Krishna. So they could see that, they understood. So immediately they offered. You can imagine dandabats means they're offering and then they get up. We offer our obeisance. Namo Mahabhadanyaya, the most munificent avatar of Krishna. Not really an avatar, he's really Krishna himself, but they use it. Mahabhadanyaya, Krishna Prema Padayate. He's giving the greatest thing of the greatest value, millions of times more valuable than any golds or diamonds. Krishna Prema. He's giving it out freely. Just chant and dance, and when you get tired, take prasadam. Then you go back to God. So he's giving it. Krishnaya, but you are Krishna himself. Krishna Chaitanya Namani, under the name of Krishna Chaitanya. Krishna Chaitanya Namani, Golda Trijay Namaha, and with his golden complexion instead of the bluish complexion. So then he instructed, okay, quit your job. I mean, they had a tremendous position, right hand, left, you know, they had so much influence, so much money. So Rupa Goswami cashed out. He had a whole boatload of gold. Can you imagine what that's worth today? Billions. At $3,000 an ounce, how much is 30 tons of gold? So he said, well, he didn't want it anymore. So he divided the wealth. He said half of it was a lot, will go to the Brahmins and the Vaishnavas for their benefit. Quarter of it go to his relatives, Prabhupada writes, because they expect something. It can cause a lot of problems. And then a quarter of it he put into the hands, get this, of a very trustworthy grocer. Wow, do we have any such trustworthy grocers around now? Here, can you keep this $10 billion? Just, you know, keep it under the table. It may be a good. So anyway, his brother was arrested. He was the prime minister. So the king wouldn't let him quit. He called in sick, But and instead he was just studying the Bhagavatam with devotees at home. And the king visited him personally and said, well, you don't look very sick to me. He said, well, I can't do the work. You can't quit, because you're my prime minister. So he arrested him. So now he's in jail. Rupa, I think, was by that time in Vrindavan. So he had access to that money for emergencies. So the jailer was a Muslim. So the jail keeper. So he said, look, just let me out. I'll give you these 5,000 gold coins. So he was scared. What happens when the king finds out? All right, 10,000. All right, now you're talking. So then he asked the Sanatana, well, what do I tell the king when he comes? You just tell him that Sanatana, wanted to go to the bathroom. The river is right there. And he went into the river, and he didn't come out. He drowned, and the body just went down. And there's no body. What can you do? So you'd have to believe him. So he believed him. And meanwhile, Sanatana goes, there's a whole adventure, the story, how he actually got to Benares, actually. And then he was instructed by Lord Chaitanya there. So, so they completely surrendered to him. They went to Vrindavan. Then they followed his instructions. They wrote books, and they lived, perfect lives of ascetics, of Goswamis. So the 6 Goswamis. Bhagavad Dasa was another very wealthy one. He was the epitome of renunciation, even more than the others. So classically, there's a beautiful song about these 6 Goswamis written by Srinivas Acharya, I think. Yeah. And one of the verses, my favorite one, describes the scene where they gave up the thing and they went, Tyaktva turnam ashesha mandala patisheni sada tuchavat bhutva dina ganeshako karunayako pina kantashrito gopi babada samatabda lahadi kallo lamagno muhur vande rupa sanatana ragoyago shri jiva gopalaka. So here's the meaning. Tyaktva turnam, they immediately gave up their very wealthy lifestyle and all their associates and all the aristocracy. Tyaktva turnam ashesha mandalapati, shrenim sada tuchavat, seeing it as all extremely insignificant. once they'd met Lord Chaitanya. And Bhutva Dina Ganeshiko, for the sake of the wretched of the earth, for everyone who isn't Krishna consciousness, because they were going to teach and they were going to write, they became mendicants, austere mendicants in Vrindavan. And so austere. Just imagine, you're living in great palaces with beautiful beds and everything's covered. And here they are, they're wandering around Vrindavan. They don't even have a residence. And they don't even have their own personal tree that they live under. They live under a different tree each night, okay? And they took on old clothes, and washed them. In other words, they lived as austerely as you can imagine. But the state of mind, Gopi Baba Rasamatab Lahadi Kallola Magnomohua. They were the wealthiest, much more wealthy than they were when they were the ministers. Gopi Baba means the highest level of devotional service to Krishna is by the gopis in their service to Krishna, the rasa dance. So they're diving and surfacing in the ocean of nectar of the gopis' emotion to Krishna, the gopis' relationship with Krishna, called the rasa. And all the time. It's not like material sense gratification. Everyone has an experience. There's a limit. There's a limit to how many tacos you can eat, right? Then it becomes a source of suffering. You know that. But this spiritual pleasure of serving Krishna, there's no limit. That's why it says end. As long as you have your consciousness, and that's why it says 24 hours, you get to the point where you can even dream of serving Krishna. I remember, who was it? Someone was telling me, probably Sura, because he was a book distributor. Bhadin Rayama knows all these stories. In the middle of the night, devotees is saying, "Oh, Hare Krishna, please take this book." They're dreaming, and then the pujaris performing. So the whole idea is that we have the reservoir of pleasure, the ocean of pleasure within us. We just have to learn how to tap into it. Krishna is there as the super soul, and if we purify our heart, Premanjanacharita Bhakti Balochanena, we can see Shyama Sundar sitting there. So if we can remember him, and we can do practical services to our, as long as we can do that, we'll be connected and we'll be feeling this highest pleasure, much, much more than any material pleasure. And it doesn't have to come to an end, because it's not limited by this body. You see, the body will eventually come to the end, but if you're absorbed in Krishna's katha and you're rasa with Krishna, when you leave the body, then you go back to Godhead, and in your spiritual body, no old age, no limitation, no death, you'll be able to continue that service to Krishna. And it all sounds very fantastic, but this is what all of our great acharyas are telling us. Are we going to say that, Prabhupada was befooled and Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Madhvacharya? No. They're telling us what they're experiencing, and they're giving us encouragement to do it also. So, that's my little... Okay, we have time for continuing. Let's do some discussion on this. How far do we get? 25-second paragraph. Okay, so we say, therefore we have to practice remembering the Lord always 24 hours a day by chanting His names and molding our life's activities in such a way that we can remember Him always. So that's what I was just describing. Then the question is, how is this possible? The Acharyas give the following example. If a married woman is attached to another man, or if a man has an attachment for a woman other than his wife, then the attachment is to be considered very strong. One with such an attachment is always thinking of the loved one. The wife who is thinking of her lover is always thinking of meeting him, even while she's carrying out her household chores. In fact, she carries out her household work even more carefully, so her husband will not suspect her attachment. Similarly, we should always remember the Supreme Lover, Sri Krishna, and at the same time perform our material duties very nicely. A strong sense of love is required here. If we have a strong sense of love for the Supreme Lord, then we can discharge our duty and at the same time remember Him. But we have to develop that sense of love. Arjuna, for instance, was always thinking of Krishna. He was the constant companion of Krishna, and at the same time, he was a warrior. Krishna did not advise him to give up fighting and go to the forest to meditate. When Lord Krishna delineates the yoga system to Arjuna, Arjuna says that the practice of this system is not possible for him. I'll say, you say, Arjuna Vacha, Yoyam Yogas Tvaya Prokta, Samyena Madhusudana, Etasyahang na pushyami chanchalat vatstitim stiram. Arjuna said, O Madhusudana, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. So then Bhagavad skips over to text 647. So then there's a little discussion there. I'll just fill it in. So Arjuna says this famous verse, Chanchalam himana Krishna pramati balabhadridham tasyaham nigraham manye vayar eva sudaskaram. This mind of mine is very chanchala, very restless, here and there, you know. We all have experience. Very obstinate, strong-willed, balabhad, strong. Chanchalamana Krishna pramati balabhadridham. Tasyaham nigraham. I think that to control this mind is more difficult than controlling the wind. Can you control the wind? I used to live in Miami. You always have to watch out for the hurricanes. Luckily, I've been free from that. But we know these incredible winds we just had in the Palisades up in L.A. 100-mile-an-hour winds. You know, it's impossible. So Arjuna said, "I can't do it." So a few verses. So Krishna says, "Yes, you can with practice." You know. And I said, "Well, okay. What if I fail? I'll be like a ribbon cloud. I'll give up my Kshatriya life and I'll go and practice this yoga system and I'll fail at that." So he said, no. So even if you fail this lifetime, you make some progress, you'll get born in a Suchinam Shrimatam Grehe, continue next life. But after the whole thing, Arjuna's not very enlivened about it. So Krishna, he recognized that and he gives him this verse. I'll say, you say. Yoginam api sarvesham madgaten antaratmana shraddhavan bhatate yomam Sameyuktatamomataha. Of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me, is the most intimately united with me in yoga, and is the highest of all. That is my opinion, Bhagavad-gītā 6:47. So I like to think that at that point Arjuna gave a great sigh of relief, because he's already thinking of Krishna all the time. He's an intimate associate of Krishna. So. And then, anyway, it goes on in chapter 7, and it's a wonderful development. He then describes Maya Saktamana, how your mind can naturally be attached to me, rather than the sitting and the pranayama and going alone and all that. It's artificial. It's not, especially in this age, it's not practical. So one who thinks of the Supreme Lord always is the greatest yogi, the supermost jnani, and the greatest devotee at the same time. The Lord further tells Arjuna that as a Kshatriya, he cannot give up his fighting. But if Arjuna fights remembering Krishna, then he will be able to remember Krishna at the time of death. But one must be completely surrendered in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. We work not with our body, actually, but with our mind and intelligence. So if the intelligence and the mind are always engaged in the thought of the Supreme Lord, then naturally the senses are also engaged in His service. Superficially, at least, the activities of the senses remain the same, but the consciousness is changed. The Bhagavad Gita teaches one how to absorb the mind and intelligence in the thought of the Lord. Such absorption will enable one to transfer himself to the kingdom of the Lord. If the mind is engaged in Krishna's service, then the senses are automatically engaged in His service. This is the art, and this is also the secret of the Bhagavad Gita, total absorption in the thought of Krishna. Modern man has struggled very hard to reach the moon, but he has not tried very hard to elevate himself spiritually. If one has 50 years of life ahead of him, he should engage that brief time in cultivating this practice of remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This practice is the devotional process, I say, you say. Shravanam kirtanam Vishnu, smaranam parasevanam, archanam bandhanam dasyam, sakyam atma nivedanam. Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.23. Okay, for extra credit, who knows? Who spoke this verse? Who said this verse in the Bhagavatam? Come on, y'all. Prahlad. Prahlad speaking this to his father, talking about speaking truth to power. Here's this fragile little 5-year-old boy, this monstrous demon who meditated for thousands of years and became superhuman. He conquered the whole universe. And he's already angry at Prahlad because this is not the first encounter. So, I think this is the one that put him over the edge. He tried to kill him. So he's giving all the 9 processes of devotional service. These 9 processes, of which the easiest, Prabhupada doesn't give a translation here. Hearing about Vishnu, chanting about him, kirtanam, remembering him, serving his lotus feet, padasevanam, archanam, worshipping as in a deity, worship, vandanam, 2 things, bowing down and offering prayers, dasyam, being a servant, sakyam, becoming the friend of the Lord, and atmanivedanam, surrendering everything. These are the 9 processes of devotional service. These 9 processes, of which the easiest is shravanam, hearing the Bhagavad Gita from the realized person, will turn one to the thought of the Supreme Being. This will lead to remembering the Supreme Lord and will enable one, upon leaving the body, to attain a spiritual body which is just fit for association with the Supreme Lord. The Lord further says, Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa nanyagamina padamam purusham divyam yati partanu chintayam. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Arjuna, is sure to reach me. Bhagavad Gita 8:8. This is not a very difficult process. However, one must learn it from an experienced person. Tad vijnanatam sagurum me bhavigachet. One must approach a person who is already in the practice. What that phrase means is that if one wants to know and experience the absolute truth, vijnanartam, one must approach a guru, a genuine guru. The mind is always flying to this and that, but one must practice concentrating the mind always on the form of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, or on the sound of his name. The mind is naturally restless, going hither and thither, but it can rest in the sound vibration of Krishna. One must thus meditate on Padamam Purusham, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in the spiritual kingdom, the spiritual sky, and thus attain him. The ways and means for ultimate realization, ultimate attainment, are stated in the Bhagavad Gita, and the doors of this knowledge are open for everyone. No one is barred out. All classes of men and women can approach Lord Krishna by thinking of him, for hearing and thinking of him are possible for everyone. The Lord further says, Bhagavad Gita 9:32-33, I'll just read this one. Mami parta vipashchite yepisyu papayonehas chiyo vaishas tata shudras tepi yanti param gatim kimpana brahmana punya bhakta raja shayastata anityamasukam lokam imam prapya bhajasvamam. Thus the Lord says that even a merchant, a fallen woman, or a laborer, or even human beings in the lowest status of life can attain the Supreme. One does not need highly developed intelligence. The point is that anyone who accepts the principle of Bhakti Yoga and accepts the Supreme Lord as the summum bonum of life, as the highest target, the ultimate goal, can approach the Lord in the spiritual sky. If one adopts the principles enunciated in the Bhagavad Gita, he can make his life perfect and make a permanent solution to all the problems of life. This is the sum and substance of the entire Bhagavad Gita. Okay, I'm going to leave it there because then Prabhupada goes into another section. We're almost through with the introduction. But I did want to, first of all, explain for those who are not so familiar with how did this introduction come to be. It's very fascinating. Prabhupada, he didn't actually write this. He dictated it into a reel-to-reel tape recorder. I don't know if some of you may never even have seen those. But those, big things. So he's living uptown. He's not down in Lower East Side, and there's no 26nd Avenue yet. And he was first Dr. Mishra, who was an established yoga teacher in New York. Somehow I had connection with him, and he was able to stay with him. Then Dr. Mishra became a little afraid if Prabhupada spoke to his followers, then he would win them over. And so he said, well, you can live over at my office, near Riverside. So it's a bit of a walk. New York and in Upper Manhattan. So he probably was basically living in an office. There's no facility to cook. He has to go all the way over to the Mishra's place, so it's inconvenient. But someone gave him this reel-to-reel machine, showed him how to use it. So Prabhupada dictated this whole thing. Maybe a few reels, because it's kind of long. And then he went out, he had to shop, and do this thing, came back, and the place had been broken into. Prabhupada suspected the superintendent himself, but anyway, he couldn't prove it. And of course, he took the one thing of value in there. I think Prabhupada had a typewriter, but that was maybe taken also. So that was actually a blessing, because it says there in the Lilamrita that Prabhupada he wasn't so attracted to staying uptown anymore, And by that time, those who were downtown, where things were really happening, that was where the hippies were and everything, they had heard of Prabhupada. And so he was being invited down there, so he was basically about to leave. But he had recorded this over several days, just speaking into this tape. It wasn't an audience or anything, but we're the audience, And he was hoping that somehow it would get transcribed and printed. So the thief took the machine, but he left the tapes. Thank God. So Prabhupada had the tapes. Eventually got another reel-to-reel, and it was transcribed. So that's how this came about, and Prabhupada's putting it all on the line. He doesn't know that there's going to be a whole society. So at least they'll have this message, and he's giving it all out like this. So I wanted to share one verse, then I'll give you a poem. Because, these verses, the Sanskrit language, what Sanskrit means is perfectly composed. And so you can do things with Sanskrit you can't do with English. All of this meter, like in English, the poetry sometimes has meter. Row, row, row your boat down the stream. But nothing like what you can do with Sanskrit. So here's one verse from the Govinda Lilamrita. I don't know why I thought of this verse, but it's just, the Govinda Lilamrita goes through all of the rasas, and everything. So there's a lot of it we should be a little leery of reading right now. But this verse there's nothing intimate about it. But it's very delightful. And you can hear the rhythm. And the sound. Denu vrindamannamandamayantam venu geetamamatam visvajantam renu ruchitatalal-kabantam kenu vikchasamayur namudantam. Now this is written by Krishna's Kaviraj, the same author of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And he got the name Kaviraj, the king of poets. To rhyme at the beginning and the end of each line is not, rhyme at all is difficult, but the beginning and end of each line. So first, Denu Vrindam Anamandamayantam. So Denu means cows, of course. Vrinda means the herds of cows. So Krishna is coming back from the forest to the village at the end of the day, and he's got all these thousands of cows, and he's herding them with all the boys. This is describing Krishna. Denu Vrindam Anamandamayantam. He's following very leisurely. Anamanda means he's just strolling along. And of course, so that's Denuvidam. Then Venugitam Amatam Visrajantam. He's creating this wonderful, all attractive song with his flute. Venugitam, which is like nectar, Amatam Visrajantam. You see? So that's it. So you got Denu, then you got Venu, then you got Renu. Renu is the dust. Renu Rushita Chalalakabantam. So as he walks, his beautiful blackish hair is swaying, and it's all being powdered with this sacred dust from Vrindavan that the cows kick up. This happens every afternoon. So then the last line is Kenu, who indeed, seeing this sight, Kenu Viksha Samayur Namodantam, who seeing this, this scene of Krishna coming back, playing that flute, would not attain the highest bliss. Now, we're not there yet, assumingly, that we can actually see, even in our meditation, Krishna. But by chanting this verse, you can see, you see. You chant it 4 or 5 times, if you learn the meaning, I can give it to you. And you can see it in your mind's eye. And there's no limit. You can chant it 10 times, 20 times, 30 times. It never gets old. This is the thing. This Hare Krishna mantra never gets old. We used to go out 3 hours. It was like, can't we think something else, No. The Krishna, 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 Krishna. All right, one more verse. This is a poem. This is about the holy name. It's actually about Hare Krishna. Written by Raghunath Das Goswami, and it's in his Stabhavali, which is, Stabhavali means a compendium of poems that he wrote. It's an anthology. So this is a great verse. Radheti nama navasundara siddha mugdam, Krishneti nama madhurabha dagada dugdham, Savakshanam sudabhiraga himena ramyam kritbhata daiva pibame vasane chadarte. An excellent fresh nectar drink. Now, this is actually the Hare Krishna mantra. Hare is Radharani. You're addressing Hara, as goddess of fortune, and the invocative is Hare. And Rama is the name for Krishna or Ram, but it's the Supreme Personality of the Godhead, and Krishna is Krishna. So, an excellent fresh nectar drink with endless subtle tastes. Such is the name of Radha, by whom all three worlds are graced. Condensed milk that is wonderfully delicious, thick and sweet. Such is the name of Krishna, in whom all attractions meet. Now mix these drinks, O thirsty tongue, and add the cooling, fragrant spice of love, a prize the wise will try to buy at any price. And then at every moment drink this beverage most fine, and make my heart supremely blissful, peaceful, and divine. So this is a very nice prayer. You can instruct your tongue like that, and at a certain point your tongue will obey you when you chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Okay, we should adjourn and get ready for our take. Thank you very much for your attention. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.